Now it seems to be working. Let's see. Yep, it's working. Okay, here we are again. Welcome to the class, evening or morning class, depending on where you are in the world. And we are studying the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita. Upadesha means instructions. Amrita means nectar, happiness, bliss, Amrita. Okay. So, now we're going to chant first, and then we'll continue with our study. And let's get out the songbook. So, we'll chant Manak Shiksha. Let's see. Let's go. Okay, let's go. Chandra Shushita Yechaya Jakachura Hey no nitai binibai Ata Krishna Bahite Trinakuri Daro nitai Say sambandha nahi jar Prita janma gehino da Say bakshu madhuraja Nitai na bunilo muke Machinam samsara suke Vidyakule Ahankara Matoya Nitai Bharavashariya Atsachere Satyakuri Mani Nityaya Puruna Himbe Akshirana Krishna Panibe Naro Nitai Jarana Tugani Nityaya Jarana Sancha Tarana Sunatanisha Nityaya Mana Satapuru Aja Narottama Baruduki Nityaya Mureko Nakuranga Jaradina Macha Nitai Banakola Kumti Chandra Shushu Tala Yechaya Yakuchuraya Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parabhadikacharya also Teta Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Haran Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Srivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sai Makunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuram Ki Jai Jagat Goswami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasadevi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Prasadam Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Utale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschachate Shatarni. So let me read the translation. In this material world, which is progressing toward hell, there's always a blazing fire. And everyone is struggling hard without finding peace. Therefore, if the world wants to have real peace, it should take shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda, which are cooling like the shining of millions of moons. Unless one takes shelter under the shade of the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda, it will be very difficult to approach Radha Krishna. Anyone who does not establish their relationship with Lord Nityananda is simply spoiling their boon of a human birth and the animal propensities of sense gratification. Never saying the names of Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya, they become absorbed in so-called material enjoyment, and their academic education and birth in a high family or great nation will not protect them at the time of death. They have become maddened by a false concept of bodily life, and thus they have forgotten their eternal relationship with Lord Nityananda. Such forgetful persons accept the illusory energy as factual. When you achieve the mercy of Lord Nityananda, then you will be able to approach Radha Krishna. Firmly catch hold of the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda. The lotus feet of Lord Nityananda are not an illusion. They are a fact, and anyone who engages in the transcendental loving service of Lord Nityananda immediately achieves their transcendental position on the spiritual platform, which is eternal and blissful. Therefore, always try to catch the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda. Narottamadas Thakur says, "My dear Lord Nityananda, I am very unhappy, so I am praying to you to make me happy. Please keep me in the corner of your lotus feet." Naratamadas Thakur Ki Jai. So, we're going to continue with our study of the Upadeshamrita by Srila Rupa Goswami and translated by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And we are on the first verse of the Upadeshamrita, which is, anyway, let's share the screen. Oh, let's do Omagana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Miritam Yena Tasmai Shigurve Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So, let's share the screen, and as we share the screen, we will chant. Hold on a second. Okay. That's right. Okay. Nana Shastra Vicharanaikanipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Pande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyago Shri Jiva Gopal Lako. I guess I should read the translation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Srila Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they can be honored, they are honored all over the three worlds, and they're worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Okay, so let's go on to the Nectar of Instruction, the Upadeshamrita. And we're in the middle of the first verse, and the first verse is Vacho Vegam, Anasakrota Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udurapashta Vegam, Tan Dirama, Yo Vishaheta Dira, Sarvamapi Ma, Pritivim Sa Shashat. If one can control the speech, the mind, the anger, the tongue, the belly, and the genitals, one is fit to be a guru and preach Krishna consciousness. And the only way you can control these is by having a higher taste and loving Krishna. Bhakti mam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tattvatat. That's the only way. With devotion, not simply by just trying to control your senses, because the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, very strong, and more difficult to control than the wind. So, actually, let me put this chat window to the side so I can see if anyone has any trouble before we start. Oh, right. That's good. Okay, so we finished with the belly and the tongue, and now we're going to go on to the urges of the genitals. In a similar manner, the urges of the genitals, the sex impulse, can be controlled but not used unnecessarily. The genitals should be used to beget a Krishna conscious child. Otherwise, they should not be used. The Krishna conscious movement encourages marriages not for the satisfaction of the genitals, but for begetting Krishna conscious children. As soon as the children are little grown up, they are sent to our Gurukul school, where they are trained to become fully Krishna conscious devotees. Many such Krishna conscious children are required, and one who is capable of bringing forth Krishna conscious offspring is allowed to utilize his genitals. So, of course, now we don't have a centralized Krishna conscious school. We have schools in different places, and many of our householders homeschool their kids, having association on the internet with other devotees who are homeschooling their children. So it seems to work out pretty well. For example, here in New Galoka, we have some people take homeschooling, and some people who are attending the school on premise. It's a day school, and they're becoming very Krishna conscious. Two of our students here are serving the deities right now. Not this instant, but on a daily basis. One of them's dressing the deities, the other one's waking up the deities and doing artis and things like that. And they're students, they have second initiation. Actually, I have 3 students who have second initiation right now, as far as I know. Yeah. In his Anuvriti explanation of the Upadeshamrita, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes that our material identification creates 3 kinds of urges: the urge to speak, the urge of demands of the mind, and the demands of the body. Bodily identification. You identify ourselves with the body. That's called upadi. When a living entity falls victim to these 3 types of urges, his life becomes inauspicious. In other words, he becomes a slave. Oftentimes I've said, if you want to see who your master is, go to the mirror and stick your tongue out. And that is your master. You are being controlled by the tongue. And sometimes I use the example. It's like a dog being waved by the tail instead of a dog wagging his tail. So the tail is wagging the dog. So the tongue is wagging us. That's the problem. One who practices resisting these demands or urges called a tapashvi. It means the fire. It's hard. Or one who practices austerities. By such tapasya, one can overcome victimization by the material energy, the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we refer to the urge to speak, we refer to useless talking such as that of the impersonal Mayavadi philosophers or persons engaged in fruitive activities, technically called karma kanda, or materialistic people who simply want to enjoy life without restriction. All such talks or literatures are practical exhibitions of the urge to speak. Many people are talking nonsensically and writing volumes of useless books, and all this is the result of the urge to speak. To counteract this tendency, we have to divert our talking to the subject of Krishna. This is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1:5-10-11. Famous verse. Nayad vachas chitrapadam harer yasho jagat pavitram pragranita karichit tadvayasam tirtam ushanti manasa yatra hamsa niraman yushikshaya. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. So, this is a typical example given by those who are acquainted with India. Because in India, you see these massive crows. And what do the crows do? They're looking for garbage, generally around the garbage dumps. I remember one year I was staying in Jagannath Puri, and the hotel, unfortunately, was right next to one of the dumps. And there were the massive crows. I mean, they were big. They were like eagle sizes. Massive, massive crows. And they were just trying to fight each other over the garbage. Because the opposite of crows is swans. Tadvag visargo janataka viplavo yasmin pratishlokamabatyapi namanananta sheyasho nikatani yatrin vanti gayanti grananti sadavaha. That's Bhagavatam 1:5-11. And this is one of Prabhupada's favorite verses. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., this is the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation full of transcendental words directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So Prabhupada used this particular verse to help people understand that even though his original Bhagavatams had so many grammatical mistakes, because English was not one of Prabhupada's, that's funny. Hope I said something funny. So even though Prabhupada's original language was not English, and there were so many grammatical mistakes, because basically Prabhupada had to edit and proofread his own book. Therefore, it still was very effective in making devotees because of the purity of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, just to go back a little bit, Gopal sent me an interesting message that Gopal was with us. He's short in stature. He was with us when we were staying at that hotel next to or motel, whatever it's called, next to the garbage dump where all the big crows were. And I had to protect him from the crows. I actually had to cover him with my cape so the crows wouldn't attack him. I don't think they would have been able to carry him away, but they would have attacked him. So, and that's when you hear all these examples. A lot of these examples are like typical examples that only people in India would understand. Just like you have the example sometimes like the hogs eating stool. I mean, of course, if you live on a farm, you'll see that, but generally, those of us who are in America don't. I'm going to relate to that. But actually, if you're in India, you see this all the time in the street. The hogs are basically the sanitation department in many cities in India. Because they have, in some places, they have actually open sewer lines in the gutters. And the hogs are putting their nostrils or nose or mouth. Basically, it's all one. With a hog, the nose and the mouth is actually the same organ, basically. I mean, obviously, different parts of the same organ. And so you see them putting that schnozola, whatever you call it, into those ditches on the side of the road. And then you really understand some of the examples that Prabhupada gives, like people like hogs, dogs, camels, and asses, praise those who do not listen to the pastimes of the Lord. So the conclusion is that only when we talk about devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can we refrain from useless, nonsensical talk. We should always endeavor to use our speaking power solely for the purpose of realizing Krishna consciousness. As for the agitations of the flickering mind, this is a big one, they are divided into two categories. The first is called aviroda priti, or unrestricted attachment. And the other is called viroda yukta krodha, anger arising from frustration. Everyone understands that? Like really intense attachment. Jayato vishek pumsam sankos tesha bhajayate sangat sanjayate sangat sanjayate kama krodha vijayate. So by contemplating sense objects, one gets attached to them, and when one gets attached to them, one gets lusty, and then after that, you got good old krodha. So, you have really like intense attachment when you meditate on it. If you don't meditate on it, you don't get attached to it. So the whole idea is that we should stop the contemplation before it becomes too late, because then it's a downhill spiral. And the other one is anger coming from frustration when we don't get what we want. That's basically the agitations of the mind. Adherence to the philosophy of the mind body's belief in the fruit of results of karma bodies. Karma bodies means people who you think you can become successful in this material world, or by performing pious activities you can become happy. And belief in plans based on materialistic desires are called aviroda priti. That means attachment. Attachment, extreme attachment. Jnanis, karmis, and materialistic plan makers generally attract the attention of conditioned souls, but when the materialists cannot fulfill their plans and when their devices are frustrated, they become angry. Frustration of material desires produces anger. And that's what Bhagavad Gita tells us. You get angry. So, yeah, let's see, materialistic plan makers. Yeah, just like in the advertisement, and the manipulation of people's minds using the internet that really produces like so many unwanted desires. So many unwanted desires. And some of it is quite subtle. There was a book written many years ago, way before the internet, when I was young. It was called The Hidden Persuaders. In this book, there were illustrations or examples given of how the advertising media uses subtle suggestion. That means suggestions that you won't even be aware of to produce material desires that weren't there before. For example, in this book, there was one example given. There was one example given of a theater movie theater, that did a test. The sociologist or psychologist did a test on the people who were in the movie theater. They wanted to see if they can induce a greater desire to eat popcorn. Traditionally, many years ago, when there were movie theaters, I don't know if there's still movie theaters, I haven't seen one in a long time, they would sell popcorn at the movie theater. So they were trying to manipulate people's minds and induce these material desires without the person knowing. So how did they do that? They would flash on the screen just like one frame, because movies come in frames, 25 frames a second or something like that, or 30 frames a second, whatever it is. So they would flash for an instant on the screen popcorn, something about popcorn. You want popcorn, or eat popcorn, popcorn's delicious, or whatever. I don't remember exactly what the message was, but it was such a small segment of time that nobody was consciously aware that that was being flashed on the screen. They just didn't know. I mean, it was just like, 1/30th of a second. How are you going to be aware of what happens in 1/30th of a second? It's, very small amount of time. So anyway, so what happened is the popcorn sales went through the roof. What does that mean? Went through the roof. That means they increased dramatically when they did that. And so that's called, subtle persuasion or hidden persuasion. And there's many instances of that. How they would sell cigarettes, using women, how they would sell alcohol using motifs that were very similar to, this is interesting, motifs that were very similar to cemeteries, like death, somehow or other. It would be hidden in the picture. Let's say there was a magazine advertisement, and in that magazine advertisement, it would be hidden within the picture. I mean, unless someone pointed it out to you, you wouldn't see it. Something that had something to do with death. And it's interesting that death, or stimulation that is in relationship to a vision of death or a thought of death, actually increases the sale of alcohol. It's really interesting. I mean, this is a book, I'm sure the book's still available. It's called The Hidden Persuaders. Of course, nowadays, they have many more sophisticated techniques. Like, for example, in the computer, when you go on, you look for something on the computer, there's this thing called content management software. It's aware of what you're looking for, and then it'll send you advertisements for that very same thing. So that, anyway, the companies do that. Not only Amazon, but practically every company does that. Content management, CMS software. Similarly, so we have to be very, very careful about what we see, what we come in contact with, and desires will come out. And wow, how did that desire come out? We're not even aware of how subtly it was suggested to us. Okay, so be careful. Similarly, the demands of the body can be divided into three categories: the demands of the tongue, belly, and the genitals. One may observe that these three senses are physically situated in a straight line as far as the body is concerned, and that the bodily demands begin with the tongue. If one can restrain the demands of the tongue by limiting its activities to the eating of prasadam, the urges of the belly and genitals can automatically be controlled. In this connection, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, is the famous Prasadam Prayer, that we used to say every time before we ate prasadam. Now they've come up with some new prasadam prayers, but that's where they weren't given by Prabhupada. Here's the prayer given by Prabhupada. Shivira Vidya Jatendira Tehekalaju Valaya Vishai Sagare Dharmadaya Jivayati Lobamaya Sudurmati Take Jitakatena Samsare Krishna Padadaya Moy Kodibara Jivadoy Swapasadan Jailabai Sirmatapao Radha Krishna Gunagao Premadako Chaitanya Natai. Oh Lord, this material body is a lump of ignorance, and the senses are a network of paths leading to death. Somehow or other we have fallen to the ocean of material sense enjoyment, and of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and uncontrollable. It is very difficult to conquer the tongue in this world, but you, dear Krishna, are very kind to us. You have sent us this nice prasadam to help us conquer the tongue. Therefore, let us take this prasadam to our full satisfaction and glorify your Lordship, Shri Shri Radha and Krishna, and in love call for the help of Lord Chaitanya and Prabhu Nityananda. I remember that. That was my favorite prayer in Krishna consciousness. Because probably liked it more than chanting Hare Krishna. Not anymore. That's all right. So, because as one advances in Krishna consciousness, the satisfaction of the tongue is not as important. I mean, for example, my own life, I pretty much eat the same thing every day, and I'm not looking for different types of tastes. I'm just looking to keep the body going. It's like putting petrol in the car, gasoline in the car, you know. Who cares whether you go to Shell or BP or whatever, as long as the gas works. And you save money. Cheap price. There are 6 kinds of rasa's tastes, and if one is agitated by any one of them, he becomes controlled by the urges of the tongue. Some persons are attracted to the eating of meat, fish, crabs, eggs, and other things produced by semen and blood and eaten in the form of dead bodies. Others are attracted by eating vegetables, creepers, spinach, or milk products, but all for the satisfaction of the tongue's demands. Such eating for sense gratification, including the use of extra quantities of spices like chili and tamarind, you can take some, but not too much, is to be given up by Krishna-conscious persons. The use of pan, hataka, betel nuts, various spices used in pan making, tobacco, LSD, marijuana, opium, liquor, coffee, and tea is indulged in to fulfill illicit demands. Actually, I was just listening to Prabhupada Memory, and Giriraj Maharaj was talking about how he was preaching to one of the Supreme Court judges. Where was it? In Chennai. I think it was in Chennai or something like that. And he got him chanting. And the Supreme Court judge basically wanted initiation. And the only thing he couldn't give up was tea. And Prabhupada said for him, we'll make a concession, he can take tea. I mean, it's interesting. Don't use that concession for yourself. But Prabhupada was saying that, it's interesting. How Prabhupada was sometimes willing to adjust certain things in order to attract important people of Krishna consciousness. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did the same thing. If we can practice accepting only remnants of food offered to Krishna, it's possible to get free from Maya's victimization. Vegetables, grains, fruits, milk products, and water are proper foods to offer to the Lord as Lord Krishna himself prescribes. However, if one accepts prasadam only because of its palatable taste, and thus eats too much, he also falls prey to trying to satisfy the demands of the tongue. Like Prabhupada said, many stalwarts have fallen down in the name of Mahaprasadam. So, in other words, don't eat too much. Palatable dishes are not for sannyasis, actually for grihastas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us to avoid very palatable dishes even while eating prasadam. If we offer palatable dishes to the deity with the intention of eating such nice food, we are involved in trying to satisfy the demands of the tongue. In other words, we're thinking, when can I eat? And we're using the deity as like the checkout counter at the supermarket. If we accept the invitation of a rich man with the idea of receiving palatable food, we are also trying to satisfy the demands of the tongue. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anjalila 227, it is said, Jivara lalaseye iti uti daya shishnodara prayana krishna nahi paya. That person who runs here and there, seeking to gratify his palate and who is always attached to the desires of the stomach and genitals, is unable to attain Krishna. Remember that. As stated before, the tongue, belly, and genitals are all situated in a straight line. They fall into the same category. Lord Chaitanya has said, Bala nakaibe, arapara, naparibe. Do not dress luxuriously and do not eat delicious food. Chaitanya Charitamrita Anjalila 6:236. Of course, that's an instruction to Raghunath Das Goswami. Don't get nervous about this. You should eat delicious food. But don't run here and there. Don't overeat. That's right. And prasadam is certainly delicious. Prabhupada actually insists that the devotees enjoy prasadam. So those who suffer from disease of the stomach must be unable to control the urges of the belly, at least according to this analysis. Yeah. Prabhupada said sometimes diabetes is caused by overeating. When we desire to eat more than necessary, we automatically create many inconveniences. However, if we observe fasting days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami, we can restrain the demands of the belly. As far as the urges of the genitals are concerned, there are two, proper and improper. One, legal and illicit sex. Or illegal, or legal and illicit sex. When a man is properly mature, he can marry according to the rules and regulations of the Shastras and use his genitals for begetting nice children. That is legal and religious. Otherwise, he may adopt many artificial means to satisfy the demands of the genitals, and he may not use any restraint. When one indulges in illicit sex as defined by the Shastras, either by thinking, planning, talking about, or actually having sexual intercourse, or by satisfying the genitals by artificial means, he is caught in the clutches of Maya, illusion. Those instructions apply not only to householders, but also to jagis, or those who are in the renounced order of life. In his book, Prema Vivarta, Chapter 7, Sri Jagadananda Pandit says, Vairagyabai Gramikata Nashunibe Kane Gramavarta Nakaibe Yabe Milibe Anhe Swapneo Na Karakbai Stri Sambhashana Grahe Sri Charyabai Asiya Chavana Yaricha Panaya Rakite Gorangera Sane Chataharida Sera Katatake Yena Mane Balanakaibe Yara Balana Paribe Vidayete Radhakrishna Sarvata Sivabe. My dear brother, you are in the renounced order of life and should not listen to talk about ordinary worldly things. This is, of course, instruction for those who are sannyasis, renounced. Nor should you talk about worldly things when you meet with others. Do not think of women even in dreams. You have accepted the renounced order of life with a vow that forbids you to associate with women. If you wish to associate with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you must always remember the incident of Chota Haridas and how he was rejected by the Lord. Do not eat luxurious dishes or dress in fine garments, but always remain humble and serve their Lordship Shri Shri Radhakrishna in your heart of hearts. The conclusion is that one who can control these 6 items, speech, mind, anger, tongue, belly, and genitals, is to be called a Swami or Goswami. Swami means master, and Goswami means master of the go, or senses. When one accepts the renounced order of life, he automatically assumes the title of Swami. This does not mean that he is the master of his family, community, or society. He must be the master of his senses. Whoops. Sorry. Unless one is master of the senses, he should not be called Goswami, but Godas, servant of the senses. Following in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, all the Swamis and Goswamis should fully engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As opposed to this, The go-dasas, that means the servants of the go, the servants of the senses, engage in the service of the senses or the service of the material world. They have no other engagement. Prahlad Maharaj has further described the go-das as a danta go, that means uncontrolled senses. Danta means tame. The actual word danta means tame. When you put a in front of it, it means untamed. Like a lion's not tamed. Untamed senses, which refer to one whose senses are not controlled, same thing. And a danta go cannot become a servant of Krishna. He's a servant of his senses. In Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.30, Prahlad Maharaj has said, Matirna Krishne Paratasvatova Mito Pitpadyeta Graha Vartanam Adanta Gopir Vishatanta Mishram Punas Charvita Charvananam. This is interesting. For those who have decided to continue their existence in this material world for the gratification of their senses, there's no chance of becoming Krishna conscious, not by personal endeavor, nor by instruction from others, or by joint conferences. They are dragged by the unbridled senses into the darkest region of ignorance, and thus they madly engage in what is called chewing the chewed. So, matir, when the mind does not want to be Krishna conscious, then even if one has good association, one will not be able to take care of it, take advantage of it, and because one is engaged in griha vratanam, taking a vow, basically. Griha, it's interesting, griha can mean house, or household life like that. So griha vratana means one who's just engaged in griha medi, being like a bull led by his nose ring. Vratanam, one has taken a vow, one has made a determination, and one has adanta gopira, uncontrolled senses, and then Vishatami enters into ignorance, tamishram. And that ignorance consists of, which is very, very interesting, punas charvita charvananam. Punas means again and again, chewing the already chewed. And sometimes I use the example when I'm describing this particular verse, that if someone chews some bubble gum or chewing gum, and you chew the sugar out, and then you put it on your bedpost. Actually, there's a song like that. This your chewing gum loses flavor on the bedpost overnight. So anyway, and then you pick it up the next morning and you try to chew it again, thinking you're going to get some happiness out of it. It doesn't work. So this is what we're doing in this material world. We keep on doing the same thing. And of course, as I mentioned many times before, Albert Einstein, our great Acharya, said the definition of insanity is if one keeps doing the same thing and thinks that they will get a different result from doing the same thing. So we keep engaging in the same activities, whether it's eating or sleeping or mating or defending or engaging in Ramya Kata, means a talk's not pertaining to Krishna or Krishna's service, and we think, I'm going to become happy by doing that. And then we become very disappointed. And of course, in the modern day world, people get married. Yes, some people get married still. People get married. Not all the time. But anyway, people form a relationship thinking that's going to give them happiness. And of course, the Bhagavad Gita teaches us that happiness in the mode of passion is like what? It's like nectar in the beginning. And it's like poison at the end. So they're thinking, they're making this relationship, a young actor or actress with a young boy or girl or whatever. And then you read about their divorce and they're going for someone else. So that's called chewing the chewed. There's always that expectation. The material world actually acts in such a way to give us that expectation of happiness, but it doesn't deliver. It's something like the example that I've given many times before. The way, let's say, I don't know if they actually do this, but it's like a cartoon. Sometimes you see a donkey carrying a big load, and then in front of the donkey is a carrot. Okay, I mean, I don't know if it works like that, but it's a cartoon I've seen. And the donkey is thinking the carrot is actually attached to the donkey, but it's in front of him, so he can't reach it. I guess it's like on a pole or a stick or whatever in front of him. So the donkey is thinking, if I go a little further, I will get the carrot. I will get my reward. And maybe they give him the carrot at the end of the day, but all day long he's going after this carrot, trying to get his reward. And there's the expectation of some sort of happiness. It's like, Christmas. Another example I give is like Christmas. There's an expectation of like extreme bliss after Santa Claus delivers his presents. And then you wake up that morning. I remember waking up, probably it's the only time before I joined the movement that I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I remember waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going and finding all these like gift wrapped items under the tree and the socks hanging by the fireplace. What a crazy scene. Anyway, and wow, I just remember, actually, I just can clearly remember this great feeling of ecstasy as I tore open these packages and tore the wrapping off and opened it up and looked at it and wow, it's what I wanted. Sometimes it wasn't what I wanted. Sometimes it was clothes, which I didn't want. But it was what I wanted. And then I didn't get the happiness. It was the expectation of happiness. By the end of the day, it was just like I was back to my normal, dull as a gull self. So that's the way the material energy is. You keep doing the same thing. Come to it one Christmas, another Christmas, another Christmas, or nowadays, of course, you get a computer, a new device. I remember so many things. Like I have this electronic watch. I got that, and I was thinking, oh, it's so blissful. It's not blissful, but there was an expectation, the newbie thing, and then after that, it's just like, wow, where's my happiness going to come from? But the Krishna consciousness is anandam buddhi vardhanam, pratipadam pranamritasvadanam, sarvatmasnapanam param vrijayate, Shri Krishna che sankirtanam, Shri Krishna sankirtanam. Okay, timed it pretty well. So we finished the first verse, and tomorrow we'll go to the second verse. I was hoping we could do it like that. And the second verse is really interesting too. The second verse details the things that deviate us from Krishna consciousness. So let us take some questions. I'm allowing you to unmute yourselves. Okay, gang. So raise your hand or whatever you want to do. Or unmute yourselves. Or type in the text window.
Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances.
Okay, Rakesh, you get one question. That's it.
Gurudev, is Vrinda Devi, Bhakti Devi, and Tulsi Devi, they are the same people?
Yes, Vrinda Devi and Tulsi Devi and Bhakti Devi, same person. Yeah. That's your question for today. Okay. Who else has a question? Raise your hand. I mean, they must have questions. This is very simple stuff.
Please
Yes,
do my
you
best
are.
to this sugar day.
Yeah, go, Paul. So, what's the question?
First, I have to apologize for the sound of beating rain. I'm in the car.
Okay.
You were just speaking about opening your Christmas presents, and sometimes it's what you want, and sometimes it wasn't what you wanted. And after a short amount of time, even if it was what you wanted, you didn't get the satisfaction. But we see a difference in culture that, especially in the West, it's very difficult to get any kind of satisfaction. There's a big sense of entitlement and very easily bored with whatever you may get, whether you wanted it or not.
That's right.
But in traditional cultures, especially, I've seen personally in India, there's more of a sense of gratitude of the children towards the parents, and the juniors towards the seniors, and so forth. And so they seem to be conditioned by the mode of goodness. They have this sense of being
that's conditioned
happy.
that's conditioned by the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, you get some happiness because in the mode of goodness, you stick to your promises, you stick to your obligations, and you get a sense of happiness. That's true, and that's very bewildering. That is actually true.
It also seems as if, if one is raised in a particular culture with a particular paradigm, that practically speaking, whatever you do get, you're satisfied with. There's a sense of gratitude there. So, of course, we want to cultivate this mood and this attitude of gratitude, but at the same time, it seems that it's a much more effective trap to keep us in the material world than the mode of passion and ignorance, which makes us miserable all the time.
So your philosophy is that we should always be in the mode of passion and ignorance so that we can get detached from the world. No, because attitude of gratitude. But let me explain. Attitude of gratitude, you get some temporary satisfaction, not happiness. I mean, this is not like a positive, like ecstasy type happiness that you're looking for. But then what happens? By the action of the time factor, it's taken away. So you're more miserable. When people die, when people have this nasty habit of dying, isn't it? And other things happen. Wars, pestilence, disease. These things are actually, very painful. Especially if you're situated in a functional family. In America, we don't have too many of those. But if you're situated in a functional family where you're gratitude, loyal to your parents, and they haven't beaten you, they don't beat you, then that attachment causes more pain later on when the person passes away. So one way or other, you're gonna get slammed. Even if you're temporarily in the mode of goodness, there's still that passionate attachment to one's, let's say, family or one's friends or something like that. And then you get smashed, ultimately. Does that make sense?
That answer's brilliant. Thank you for it so much. More than anything I've ever heard.
Yep, now you heard it. Now you heard it, now you didn't. Please, let's see, okay. Here's the first question. I'm taking questions from the text window, the chat window. Please start by humble obeisance. Who eats dead bodies? Everybody who's not a vegetarian. What a question. What a question. You should realize that. Anybody who goes and eats, I don't even want to say the word, steak. Steak, hamburger, McDonald's. What do you think they're eating? It's dead bodies or parts of dead bodies. Like if you go to KFC, which used to be called Kentucky Fried Chickens, then you get a bucket of legs or a bucket of wings or gizzards or a heart. So, I mean, that's a dead body. Not if Human beings, the cannibals, eat dead bodies. Like in Fiji, they used to eat other people. In some cultures, maybe it was in Fiji, like if you eat the body of your enemy, you absorb his strength, like that. So, but this is not specifically what Prabhupada was talking about in the purport. He was talking about people who eat meat, fish, and eggs. Eggs are an embryo, or at least the beginning, not the, if it's not fertilized, it's not an embryo, but at least it's the flux. I'm not going to mention the whole word coming from the chicken. It's disgusting. Disgusting. So, yes, dead bodies. Okay. How does controlling the tongue keep all the senses under control? Because if one eats too much, there's too much pressure on the lower organs, first of all. Secondly, if one eats too much, one will get more passionate energy. Like Prabhupada was in Russia, and he said, they want to eat like tigers, and they'll become tigers. They want to eat meat like tigers. And so you get this meat passion, or if you eat too much vegetarian, passionate protein. For example, sometimes urd dal is considered non-vegetarian. Why is it considered non-vegetarian? It is vegetarian. You can offer it to Krishna, obviously. But because it has so much protein, if you take too much of it, you start shaking with energy, and then the senses will go out of control. When you eat too much, then it comes out one way or the other. So it's controlling the tongue. And also when you're really into all these different tastes, it agitates the minds. One should cultivate satisfaction. I remember there's some stories about Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur that even when he would get different types of tasty prasadam, he would mix it all together. So I'm not suggesting that. I mean, I certainly like tasty quinoa. I eat very simply every day. It's nice. So how to differentiate between material and spiritual frustration? Spiritual frustration is, why haven't I attained Krishna? Material frustration is, why haven't I obtained my beloved, or, the perfect wife or husband, or why am I not getting nice tasting pizza or something like that? That's pretty easy to differentiate. Yes, it's okay to consume a little more protein if we work out for exercise. Yes. Prabhupada said, if you work like an elephant, you can eat like an elephant. But if you work like a bird and you're sitting on your trasero all day long, trasero is your seat, then you'd better eat like a bird. Yeah, sure. Like when Prabhupada first started the movement and he was cooking for everybody and doing everything and shopping and doing everything, he would eat so many chapatis every day. I think it was like 5 or 7 chapatis every day. When I was a young brahmachari, it's hard to imagine me as a young brahmachari, or had a young brahmachari body, then I would be able to eat, 8 or 10 chapatis, just like I loved it. And now I don't eat any chapatis. Am I a Maya? I just I need less. I'm not working out. I'm not doing construction anymore. I'm exercising every day. So, eat according to your needs. That's very important. So, yeah, consuming protein is fine. You need some protein. You need some carbohydrates, like that. You need some vitamins. You need some fats, etc. Eat a balanced diet. At our temple here, we provide a very balanced diet, a very healthy, balanced diet. Sunday, we provide killer prasadam. If you're interested in... Anyway, but you don't want to eat like that every day, or else you will be in samadhi very, very quickly. or you will have some like lifestyle diseases. Too much salt, too much sugar, too much fried foods. You got to be careful. You want to preserve your health. You got to be really careful. Probably said you can get a disease from eating too much, which probably termed diabetes, and there's other diseases from eating too much too. And eating too little, probably said it's like a tubercular type situation from eating too little. I mean, there's other causes of tuberculosis. Obviously, there's a virus or virus, whatever. So, but eating too little, you get weak, and your mind gets weak. So you don't want to eat too much. And Krishna says in the Gita, a yogi isn't he or she that doesn't eat too much, it doesn't eat too little, doesn't sleep too much, doesn't sleep too little, but is moderate in their activities. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much. And tomorrow we go to the second chapter. I think it's quite interesting, the Upadeshamrita. I'm trying to keep it interesting with interesting examples and stories so that people can understand it. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada. Srila